Jack Turner loved the sky. It was his escape, his peace, the place where the world's troubles couldn't touch him. For 3 decades, his old yellow crop duster had been his companion, carrying him over the endless farmland. But that day, the storm came faster than expected. The first drops of rain hit his windshield just as he banked east toward home. The wind howled, stirring up dust and leaves, and in the distance, lightning clawed across the sky. Jack gritted his teeth, adjusting his grip on the controls. He had flown through worse, but something about this storm felt different, like a warning. Then he saw her. A silver sedan lay half-submerged in a roadside ditch, its front tires spinning uselessly in the mud. Beside it stood a woman, her arms waving desperately. The road was empty in both directions. No help was coming. Jack's first instinct was to fly home and call someone, but something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the storm's eerie silence between thunderclaps or the way she glanced over her shoulder, like someone was chasing her. Jack didn't think, he acted. Scanning the ground for a clear spot, he made a rough landing, his wheels bouncing hard against the soaked earth. He cut the engine, the familiar scent of fuel mixing with rain-soaked soil as he climbed out. The woman stood frozen, staring at him as if she couldn't believe he was real. Jack tipped his cap. "You look like you could use a hand." She blinked, then exhaled shakily. "Yeah, my car's stuck. My phone's dead. No one's come by." Jack glanced at the road. "Storm's only getting worse. My place is a few miles from here. You can ride it out there." She hesitated, her gaze flicking toward the sky, then back to him. "You landed just to help me?" Jack shrugged. Seemed like the neighborly thing to do. For the first time, she smiled, a small, tired thing. "Claire," she said. "Jack Turner." He extended his hand, and when she took it, her grip was firm despite the cold. The flight back was tense. Claire sat stiffly, her arms crossed, eyes locked on the horizon. Jack had flown plenty of nervous passengers before, but this was different. She wasn't afraid of flying. She was afraid of something else. By the time they reached his farm, the storm had settled in, thick clouds pressing against the earth. Martha, his wife, met them at the door, raising an eyebrow at the unexpected guest. "She got caught in the storm," Jack explained. Martha, ever practical, handed Claire a towel. "Well, you're safe now. I'll put some coffee on." Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. As she sat at the kitchen table, steam curling from her mug, Jack noticed the way her fingers trembled slightly against the porcelain. "You got family in town?" he asked. She shook her head. "Just passing through." Jack frowned. "Through where?" She hesitated, a second too long. "Had some business to take care of." Jack exchanged a glance with Martha. Something wasn't right. Later that night, as the storm raged outside, Jack woke to a sound, soft, urgent whispers. He moved silently down the hall, stopping just outside the spare room. Through the crack in the door, he saw Claire sitting on the bed, a phone pressed to her ear. "No, I couldn't make it." "Yes, I know. I'll figure it out." Jack tensed. She had said her phone was dead. She had said there was no one to call. And yet, here she was talking to someone. A slow, uneasy feeling curled in his gut. Claire wasn't just stranded. She was running from something. And whatever it was coming for her. Jack Turner had always trusted his gut. It had kept him alive through decades of flying, through countless storms. And now, as he sat across from Claire in his dimly lit kitchen, it whispered that something wasn't right. The rain hammered against the windows, wind howling through the trees, but inside, the farmhouse was warm. The scent of fresh coffee filled the space as Claire wrapped her hands around the steaming mug Martha had given her. She had changed into some of Martha's old clothes, her wet hair still clinging to her face. She should have looked relieved to be out of the storm. Instead, she looked ready to bolt. Jack studied her carefully. "You got family in town?" Claire's fingers tensed around the mug. "No." Jack frowned. "Just passing through then?" She nodded, not meeting his eyes. "Yeah, had some business to take care of." Martha, ever the kind-hearted one, smiled gently. "You want to call someone? Let them know you're safe." Claire hesitated, just long enough for Jack to notice. Then, she shook her head. "No one to call." A lie. Jack knew it the second she said it. He'd spent his whole life reading people. Farmhands who didn't want to admit they broke the tractor, neighbors covering up a bad harvest. And now, this woman sitting at his kitchen table, trying too hard to appear calm. She wasn't just stranded. She was hiding. Jack leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. He wasn't one to pry, but something about Claire set him on edge. The way she glanced at the window every few minutes, like she expected someone to be out there. The way she barely touched her coffee, even though she looked half frozen. The storm outside raged on, lightning flashing in the distance. Martha sighed, shaking her head. If this keeps up, we might lose power. Jack nodded. Storm should pass by morning. You can stay the night. I'll drive you into town once the road's clear. Claire exhaled, and for a moment, Jack thought she looked relieved. But when she met his gaze, there was something else there, something he couldn't quite place. Fear? Guilt? She nodded. I appreciate that. But even as Martha led her to the spare room, Jack knew Claire wouldn't be sleeping much tonight. Hours later, Jack sat in his recliner, nursing a cup of coffee as rain lashed against the windows. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then he heard it. A voice, low, urgent. Jack frowned, setting down his cup. The sound was coming from the hallway. Moving quietly, he stepped toward the spare room. The door was cracked open just enough for him to see Claire sitting on the edge of the bed. A phone pressed to her ear. No, I couldn't make it. Yes, I know. I'll figure it out. Jack tensed. She had said her phone was dead. She had said there was no one to call. And yet, here she was, whispering into the darkness. Jack stepped back before she could see him, his heart pounding. Claire wasn't just lost. She was running from something. And whatever it was big. The storm hadn't let up. Rain pounded against the farmhouse roof, wind howling through the trees like a warning. Jack Turner sat in his recliner, staring at the fire crackling in the hearth, but his mind wasn't on the storm. It was on Claire. She hadn't said much at dinner. She ate in silence, barely touching her food, her eyes flicking toward the window every few minutes, like she was waiting for something or someone. Jack had seen people hide fear before, but Claire wasn't just afraid. She was trapped in some invisible fight, and he had a bad feeling it wasn't over yet. He should have let it go. He should have gone to bed. But then he heard it. A voice, low, urgent. Jack frowned and set his coffee down. The sound was coming from down the hall. Moving silently, he stepped closer to the spare room. The door was cracked open just enough for him to see inside. Claire sat on the edge of the bed, back hunched, a phone pressed tightly to her ear. A phone she had told him was dead. Jack's pulse quickened. No, I couldn't make it, she whispered. Yes, I know. I'll figure it out. Her voice was sharp, edged with frustration, but underneath, he could hear it. Fear. Jack's stomach twisted. He had known something was off the moment he saw her on the side of the road. But this? She wasn't just hiding. She was in trouble. He stepped back, moving away before she could see him, his mind racing. She lied. About her phone. About not having anyone to call. But why? Jack wasn't sure how long he stood there in the dark. The sound of the storm fading into the background as a new kind of tension settled over him. And then the sky split open. A roar, deafening and sharp, cut through the night. The farmhouse trembled as something massive passed overhead. Jack rushed to the window just in time to see it. A fighter jet slicing through the clouds, banking in a tight, deliberate turn above his land. Jack's breath caught. This wasn't normal. The radio on his desk crackled to life, a voice cutting through the static. This is the United States Air Force. Attention, yellow crop duster registration in 7264T. Acknowledge immediately. Jack stiffened. That was his plane, his crop duster. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. They weren't just flying over. They were looking for him, or rather for someone in his house. Jack turned slowly toward the hallway, toward the spare room where Claire sat in the dark. She wasn't just running from something. Something was hunting her, and now it had found them. Jack Turner had been in his share of trouble before. Engines failing mid-air, bad landings, angry debt collectors. But nothing like this. Nothing like standing in his own farmhouse, staring at a woman who had just turned his quiet life upside down. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside, The only sound was the crackle of the radio. The voice on the other end was sharp, commanding. "Attention, yellow crop duster registration in 7264T. Ground all flight activity immediately. This is a matter of national security." Jack clenched his jaw, his fingers curling into fists. National security? Over his old plane? He turned to Claire. She stood frozen near the kitchen doorway, her face pale, her breathing sharp and uneven. She wasn't surprised. She wasn't even confused. She had expected this. Jack took a slow step forward. "You want to tell me what the hell is going on?" Claire swallowed hard, glancing at the radio, then back at him. "I didn't think they'd find me this fast." Jack's got twisted. "Find you?" His voice was rough, edged with disbelief. "What did you do?" Claire shook her head quickly. "I didn't do anything. Not like that. But I need to leave now." Jack grabbed her arm before she could move past him. Not rough, but firm. "You don't take another step until you tell me the truth." She hesitated, just for a moment. Then she exhaled and met his gaze. "I used to work for the government," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "A classified operation. I had clearance to access highly sensitive information." Jack narrowed his eyes, and Claire looked away, her hands curling into fists at her sides. "And I found something I wasn't supposed to." A slow, cold feeling crawled up Jack's spine. "What kind of something?" She swallowed hard. "A breach. Someone on the inside was leaking classified data, military flight paths, drone development projects, things that could compromise national security." She shook her head. "I reported it. I followed protocol. But the wrong people found out." Jack exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. This was insane. He was just a farmer, a crop duster pilot, not someone who got caught up in government conspiracies. But now he was standing in his kitchen with a woman who had just admitted she was a fugitive. His plane, his name, his farm. He was in this now, whether he liked it or not. "Who's after you?" he asked, his voice low. Claire's gaze flicked to the window, with a faint red glow of an aircraft beacon pulsed in the sky. "People with power," she murmured. "People who don't care about right or wrong, only about keeping their secrets buried." Jack's jaw tightened. He had two choices: turn her in and let the authorities deal with it, or trust his gut, the same gut that had told him to land in that field when he saw her stranded. Claire met his eyes again, and for the first time, she looked tired, like someone who had been running too long. Jack exhaled, glancing at the radio as another command came through. "In 7264T, failure to comply will be met with intervention." Jack turned back to Claire, his mind already made up. "Come with me," he said. Her brows furrowed. "What?" Jack was already moving, grabbing his flight jacket off the hook. "If we take off now, we can be gone before they even know what happened." Claire hesitated for only a second. Then she nodded. Jack opened the door, the wind whipping through the porch as he led her into the night. The chase had begun. Jack Turner had spent his life outrunning storms. He knew how to read the sky, how to move with the wind instead of against it. But this time, the storm wasn't in the sky. It was standing in front of him, wrapped in a government secret with nowhere left to run. Claire's breath was shallow, her eyes darting between Jack and the radio, still crackling with commands. Outside, the Air Force jet circled like a hawk, waiting for a target. In 7264T, failure to comply will be met with intervention. Jack clenched his jaw. Intervention. He knew what that meant. He had two choices: walk inside, pick up the phone, and let the authorities handle this, or trust his gut, the same gut that had told him something was off the moment he saw Claire stranded on the roadside. Jack never ignored his instincts. "Come with me," he said, already moving. Claire hesitated. "Jack." "No time." He cut in, yanking open the barn doors. Inside, tucked beneath a heavy tarp, sat his old Piper Super Cub, a plane built for slipping between cracks in the sky. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't fast, but it could get them out. Claire's breath hitched. "You have another plane?" Jack threw the tarp back, his hands moving fast. "Never got around to selling it." She swallowed hard. "Jack, you don't have to do this." He looked at her then, steady and firm. "Yeah, I do." A second of silence. Then she nodded. They worked quickly. Jack fueled the plane while Claire kept watch. Every second felt like a lifetime. The storm masked some of their movement, but the Air Force wasn't stupid. They'd be on them soon. Jack climbed into the cockpit, flicking switches, feeling the engine come alive beneath his hands. Claire hesitated just before getting in, her fingers gripping the edge of the door. "This is insane," she whispered. Jack let out a dry chuckle. "Probably." With a deep breath, she climbed in beside him. Jack didn't waste time. He taxied fast, bouncing over the uneven dirt. The moment he saw an opening in the sky, he gunned it. The Super Cub roared, lifting off the ground just as headlights flared at the edge of his property. A black SUV skidded onto the airstrip, doors flying open, men in dark suits jumping out. But they were too late. Jack and Claire were already gone. The storm swallowed them whole, clouds thick as smoke, rain slamming against the windshield. Jack kept them low, hugging the treetops flying by instinct. Beside him, Claire was gripping her seat so tight her knuckles turned white. "Hold on," Jack muttered. A shadow loomed above them. The F-16. Claire's breath hitched. "They found us." Jack's grip tightened on the controls. He wasn't giving up yet. With one last glance at the storm ahead, he pushed the plane forward, disappearing into the night. The roar of the F-16 echoed through the storm, a predator in the sky. Jack Turner gritted his teeth, his fingers tightening around the controls of the old Piper Super Cub. This plane had been built for quiet, for slipping between the cracks, not for outrunning fighter jets. And yet, here they were, chased through the night, their only advantage the storm raging around them. Beside him, Claire sat rigid, her breath shallow. Jack stole a glance at her. Her eyes were locked on the jet outside, her expression unreadable, but her hands told the truth, white-knuckled and shaking as they gripped the seat. "We're not outrunning that thing," she said, her voice barely audible over the storm. Jack snorted. Wasn't planning on it. Claire shot him a look, but before she could argue, the radio crackled. "Unidentified aircraft. This is U.S. Air Force Command. You are ordered to divert your course immediately and land at the nearest airfield. Failure to comply will be met with force." Jack exhaled through his nose. "They sound real friendly." Claire swallowed. "They don't know I'm with you." "Not yet." Jack's jaw clenched. "And if they find out?" Claire didn't answer. She didn't have to. Jack knew what happened to people who knew too much. He had been flying long enough to understand that governments didn't chase after ghosts unless they wanted to make them disappear. A shadow streaked past their cockpit. The F-16 banked hard, circling back, cutting off their exit to the east. Jack scanned the terrain ahead. Trees. A river cutting through a canyon. His only chance. "We need to get low," he muttered. Claire's eyes widened. "Are you crazy?" Jack shot her a quick, humorless grin. "Probably." Before she could protest, he pulled the stick, sending them into a steep descent. The storm winds fought back, shaking the plane, rattling the frame. Claire sucked in a breath, gripping the seat even tighter. The river came into view, a winding silver ribbon, snaking through the canyon walls. No room for mistakes. No second chances. "Hold on," Jack warned. The plane dove into the canyon, skimming just above the water. The walls closed in around them, rain blurring the view, but Jack didn't blink. He had spent years flying through tight spaces, dodging tree lines, cutting it close. But this was different. Above them, the F-16 hesitated, forced to pull up or risk losing sight of them completely. Claire let out a slow, shaky breath. Did we lose them? Jack didn't relax. Not yet. His hand stayed firm on the controls, his pulse a steady drumbeat in his ears. "For now," he muttered. The river stretched ahead, leading them east. But Jack knew this wasn't over. They had won themselves a few minutes. Now, they had to figure out how to win the war. The wind screamed against the cockpit as Jack Turner guided the Super Cub over the rolling hills. The storm had given them a head start, but the chase wasn't over. It was never over. Beside him, Claire sat silent, her hands still gripping the edges of her seat like she was bracing for impact. Jack could feel the weight of her gaze, the unspoken question lingering between them. Why was he doing this? Jack should have turned her in. Should have landed the plane, let the government take over, and gone back to his quiet life of dusting crops and fixing engines. Instead, he was here, flying low over the landscape, trying to outrun a world he had no business being part of. He'd always trusted his gut, and right now, it told him one thing. If he let Claire get caught, she wouldn't live to see the inside of a courtroom. The radio crackled again. All ground units, confirm extraction of the target. Jack's stomach twisted. Extraction, not arrest, not detainment. He glanced down. A black SUV tore across the dirt road below, heading straight for Claire's escape route. They weren't waiting for her to land. They were cutting her off. Jack's grip tightened. His plan might not have missiles or guns, but he still had one last trick up his sleeve. He banked hard, lining up with the SUV's path. Claire's eyes widened. "Jack, what are you?" "Hold on." The ground rushed toward them. Jack pulled up at the last second, sending the Super Cub slicing through the air just feet above the vehicle's roof. The wind force alone was enough to send the SUV skidding, tires screeching against the wet dirt. The radio erupted with static, the shouting of men, confusion. Claire gasped, twisting in her seat to look back. The SUV had spun out, wheels half buried in the mud. The escape route was clear. Jack let out a breath, his heart pounding. "You're welcome." Claire turned to him, her expression unreadable. And then, for the first time, she smiled. A real one, small but full of something Jack hadn't seen in her before. "Hope." The radio crackled again. "Jack, what the hell are you doing?" A different voice this time. Not military, not a threat. Someone who knew him. Reeves. Jack ignored him. He had made his choice. Below, the black SUV was nothing but a speck now, fading into the storm. Claire's contact, her only shot at clearing her name, was waiting just beyond the hills. She exhaled. "Jack, thank you." Jack smirked, trying to steady his pulse. Just another day in paradise. The storm still raged, the wind still howled, and danger still lurked in the distance. But for the first time that night, Jack felt like they had a real shot at making it out alive. The sky stretched endlessly above Jack Turner as he guided the Super Cub back toward his farm. The hum of the engine was steady beneath him, a familiar rhythm, but nothing about this flight felt familiar. Not after what had just happened. He had just evaded an F-16. He had just thrown himself into a government conspiracy. He had just risked everything for a woman he had met less than 24 hours ago. And yet, somehow, it had felt like the right thing to do. Beside him, Claire was gone. Safe. The black SUV that had been hunting her was now just a shadow in his memory, lost in the storm. But the weight of what he had done lingered. He had no regrets. The farmhouse came into view, its porch light glowing warmly against the dark night. Martha. He had left her behind without a word, and now he had to face her, knowing he couldn't explain half of what had happened. Jack landed smoothly on the dirt airstrip, dust kicking up as the plane came to a rolling stop. He exhaled and climbed out, stretching stiff limbs before making his way to the house. Martha was waiting. She stood at the door, arms crossed, watching him with a mixture of curiosity and knowing. Jack had never been good at keeping secrets from her, and he wasn't about to start now. "You left the radio on," she said, her voice even. Jack froze. Of course. The radio. The entire time, she had been listening. She had heard the commands, the threats, the chase. She had known exactly what was happening. Martha stepped forward, studying him for a long moment. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. "You did the right thing," she said simply. Jack let out a slow breath, tension leaving his shoulders. He hadn't needed her to say it, but hearing the words settled something deep inside him. He pulled something from his pocket, a small badge, given to him by Reeves, the government man who had been chasing Claire. Jack turned it over in his palm, studying it. A token of gratitude, they had said, a sign that he was now part of something bigger than himself. Martha tilted her head. "Are you going to take it?" Jack stared at the badge for a long time. It represented a door he could step through, a life far different from the quiet one he had built here. In the end, he shook his head. "Nah," he said, tucking it away. "I think I've had enough excitement for one lifetime." Martha smirked, reaching for his hand. "Good." They stood in silence for a moment, the storm finally fading into the distance. Jack glanced up at the sky, thinking about the choices that led him here. Sometimes a single act of kindness could change everything. And sometimes the biggest adventures began with simply doing the right thing. Jack Turner never set out to be a hero. He was just a man who saw someone in trouble and made a choice that led him into a storm far bigger than the one in the sky. But in the end, it wasn't about the chase, the danger, or the secrets Claire carried. It was about doing what was right, even when it was hard. How often do we pass by someone in need, thinking someone else will help? How many times do we hesitate, afraid of stepping into something bigger than ourselves? The truth is, we don't have to be heroes to make a difference. Sometimes a small act of kindness, a helping hand, a listening ear, a moment of courage can change the course of someone's life. Jack risked everything because his gut told him the right thing to do wasn't always the easy thing. And isn't that true for all of us? Integrity, kindness, and courage still matter, even in a world that sometimes tells us they don't. Maybe your moment won't come in a storm. Maybe it'll be a neighbor struggling with groceries, a friend who just needs someone to listen, or a stranger fighting a battle no one sees. But when the moment comes, will you take the leap? If this story resonated with you, if you believe in standing up for what's right, in kindness and courage, then join us. Subscribe to the channel, share your thoughts in the comments, and be part of something greater. Because sometimes the smallest choices lead to the biggest adventures. What would you have done in Jack's place? Let's talk about it. See you in the next story.